So we have our direct light working perfectly. Now it's time for us to set our ambient light, and we're going to do that with an HDR. The only thing you need to keep in mind when you choose your HDR is that the light of the sun needs to match the light of your HDR. And that means that if you choose more of a sunset sort of HDR, you need to set the sun to appropriate time for the light colors and positions to match. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Choose an HDR and set your sun to be something close to what you see in the HDR. So we're going to create the HDR right now. I'm going to open the material editor, and on V-Ray textures, we're going to create a V-Ray HDRI. I'm going to open this, and you can select any HDR that you want. So I'll select an image, and I'll just choose a few different ones so that you can see the difference on the render. So I'll choose this one that is sort of a sunset, and I'll click open. And we'll choose the mapping into spherical mapping. You can see that you can rotate the image here if you like. And we're going to apply this as an environment. So I'm going to create a new light source. On the Create panel, Lights, I'm going to choose V-Ray Lights. And I'm just going to create a V-Ray light anywhere on the scene. And on the Modify panel, I'm going to change the type to Dome Light. So I've changed this to Dome Light. And then we're going to change the texture of this image. So I'm going to open the material editor again, and I'm going to click and drag this to the texture as an instance. And I'm also going to use the same image as the environment. So open environment, and I'll click and drag to the environment map, also as an instance. Once that's done, let's just do a quick test render and see where we're at. So as you can see, the lighting changes a bit, but as I told you, the sun is not matching the HDR, so it looks very odd. So like I said, every time you change the HDR, you need to change the sun to something like it. So I'm going to set like 6 in the afternoon and do another test render. And you can see it looks a lot more realistic because now the HDR and the sun all match. So it looks much better this way. But I'm not going to use a sunset in my render. I'm going to use something lighter. So I'm going to change the HDR. Just something more like a cloudy blue sky. Something like that. And also, I'll have to change the sun. So I'll set this to something like 4 or 3 in the afternoon. And do another quick test render. Looking good, but I feel it could be lighter. So we're going to do a couple things here in order for this to be lighter. First, we are going to add a lot more influence on this light that comes from the hallway. First, to do that, I'll have to create an additional light just to help it out. So I'm going to create another V-Ray light. This one is going to be a plain light. And I'm going to place it right at my hallway. So something like that. And just place it. And change the scale. Of course, it's way too big. It doesn't have to be this big. So this light that I have here is not going to be a normal light. We are going to change in the options so it's a skylight portal. So it's only going to work as a portal. It's just going to help the light to come in better in this source. Okay, so I've got that set up, but I still need to change the exposure. I need to change the exposure of the HDR. I don't want to change the overall exposure. I just want the ambient light to be stronger. So I'm going to open my HDR and I'm going to increase the overall multiplier to something like 2 for now. Let's see how it looks. Okay, we're getting there, but I still need this to be lighter. I'm going to change the sun position to 4 in the afternoon, just so it comes in more easily into the scene. And I'm going to increase the multiplier for the HDRI just a little bit more. So 3 and a test render. There you go. The last thing I'm going to do is just rotate this HDR just a little bit. Like so, and do one last test render. So I've got to where I wanted with the HDR. I just feel like the whole scene could be just a little lighter because we still have areas that are way too dark on the left side. So I'm going to switch the rendering exposure control just a little bit. So we have a value of 2. Let's switch to something like 1.5 and test render. And there you go. So we have a light setup. In our next module, we're going to start to apply some materials to the scene. So we'll see you guys then.